I know that my life has always worked better when I'm not just trying to do things in the context of, my own little family, when I have access to other mamas, when I have access to other families, other people who have skills and ways of being in this world that I don't have. And you spoke to kind of the retreat too. I mean, that was something I witnessed just there in microcosm.
This is Holly. Hello, welcome for the Heartmind podcast. And I have with me today Amy Day, and I'll introduce her a little bit more. We're here to talk about family, but first and foremost, I'd like to introduce her and hear about your journey. And we'll start with just saying Amy and I are at the HUUF headquarters, sacred space. HUUF stands for Humboldt Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. And it's obviously Unitarian Universalists. You said it, Amy, that no Unitarian Universalist is the same. So it's a very unique community to Humboldt. And a lot of my friends are like, what is this spiritual community? So maybe we'll get into that a little bit too, which I think feeds into our topic of family. Amy is our lay minister, and I would love to hear about your calling to pastoral care and what led you there. Amy, how did you end up in this position?
How did I end up here? I've been having to answer that question a lot this week.
Have you?
I have. So I think I'm just going to get good and familiar with this story, I guess. I grew up in, I think a lot of UUs, right, as we refer to Unitarian Universalists. I think it's becoming less common. More and more people are unchurched, as they say. But I feel like a lot of people are drawn to this space because they have spiritual trauma. They were raised in a traditional church setting where I think certain aspects of that really resonated with them. They had a strong sense of wanting to connect with the divine, wanting to understand themselves as part of something connected to something larger than themselves, something mystical, something powerful, something beautiful. And so that really resonated. But then all this other baggage came along with that. So I fall into that category for sure, having been raised in kind of the evangelical wing of the Christian church. So my early adult self, I would say like my late teens, early 20s, I had just kind of assumed that part of my life was over. Organized religion, thank you, check that off my experience list. I don't need to delve back. I know what that's all about. So I think, but that, the yearning doesn't leave you, even if the form takes different faces. And so that yearning, I guess, after I kind of absconded with the faith of my childhood, kind of led me to yoga, when I was in my 20s, and then eventually to yoga teacher training. And so that became a big part of my spiritual path. And that was really healing because of, just coming back into my body, being raised in purity culture. And for those who don't know what purity culture means, a lot of that has to do with, the idea of original sin, that you came into this world not inherently good, but inherently bad, inherently fallen, and that you can't trust the desires, the appetites, the knowing even of this body. And that was something that I needed a lot of help and support and recovery and reclaiming, that I could trust this body, that I could be in this body, that what this body wanted and needed was essentially holy. So spent a lot of time on my yoga mat, a lot of time in yoga studios, a lot of times chanting and learning about my chakras and all of that. And then there was just a turning point, I think, once I felt steeped enough in that, and I had done a lot of my own personal healing work, just started kind of looking around at the larger collective, if you will, looking at the larger world and just seeing this huge disconnect, at least in the yoga community at which I was a part of, and feeling like here we would gather in these spaces and talk about things like light and liberation and healing and all these beautiful things. And then it wasn't translating, it wasn't rippling out. It was almost like, they talk about in right-wing, political circles about like trickle down economics. Like if you just build up the wealthy class, then it'll trickle down to the poor. And that doesn't work. And it felt a little bit like that in these yoga circles that I was part of. It was just like, oh, we just keep filling ourselves up with goodness, and that'll just radiate out. But it was translating to me as this almost kind of willful ignorance, kind of this good vibes only. It's just like, I don't want to be troubled with, the genocide happening on the other side of the world. I don't want to be impacted by the unhoused people in my community. I just want to focus on my spiritual path. And that just wasn't sitting well with me after a certain point. And so a friend of mine had been working here as we really like our acronyms in this world, the DRE, the Director of Religious Education, which works a lot with youth and children. And the minister here was retiring. So she came to me and she said, you should apply. It's basically what you do anyway. And I kind of just looked at her. I don't know nothing what you're saying is making any sense to me. I'm like, organized religion. I'm not a minister. Like, why are we having this conversation? And yet there was just something very compelling about what she offered forth to me. And so the advice I got was just, well, just come try it on for size. So I sat in the back of the sanctuary on my first time and, looked at these. First of all, it wasn't a crucifix. It was these beautiful redwood paintings.
Yeah.
And there was a lot that felt very familiar, almost in a like, I'm in a church. What am I doing here? But there was a lot that felt very unfamiliar and really beautiful. And what really resonated with me, it wasn't about spirituality just for the sake of the self. It was spirituality that is meant to ripple out into the larger world and the larger collective. By connecting and healing and supporting others, we do that work for ourselves as well. So it kind of filled in the gaps that I didn't know were there.
Two things. So how long ago was that?
How long ago? Oh, it's 2025. This was probably 2018, around that time.
So 7 years.
Yeah, 7 or 8 years.
And then you weren't a part of UU.
It was not.
Before?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I had lived in this area for a really long time, and I didn't even know that this was here. This is a group that doesn't like to proselytize. So I was like, I'm sorry, where is this? What is this place? So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you came, you visited the ceremonies that we do. It is very church-like, right? Because we meet Sunday mornings, which is very much like church. But, and then tell me the journey from that first time to becoming what you are today.
Yeah. So I think one of the first things I did during that discernment period is I reached out to people who I trust. So I spent time with my friend and, tell me more about this community. Tell me more about what your vision of ministry and what a minister is, because coming from my background, I have a very different take on that word. I spent time with a mentor of mine, this woman, Karen Harris, who, was in fact
I'll
minister of this fellowship. And I kind of thought Karen might talk some sense into me and be like, oh, honey, no, you're not qualified. You shouldn't pursue this. And she had a completely opposite take. She said, if this is something that your heart is calling you to, then you need to pursue that. And the next thing you need to do is you need to get in there and you need to forge relationships. You need to get to know these people. You need to get to know who they are. You need to know their stories. You need to know what it is that calls them here. You need to become a part of this community, and then you're going to have an understanding of how to serve. It was very, very slow at first. I think the first thing I did was I signed up as they needed a youth choir director for 3 Sundays a month. This very super part-time thing. I have music in my background, so I'm like, okay, I can do that. And then the next thing they needed was someone to help out in the kids' classroom and RA. So it's just one thing kind of built upon the next. We went through a series of professional ordained ministers that really weren't good fits until finally there was this question of hey, you who've been here, who've been growing alongside of us, who has a heart for this community, what would you say to stepping into this role?
And were you doing worship leading at times?
I was, yeah, but everything was very gradual. I think honestly, if I had come and, thrown my resume into the pile and I had said, "Yes, you're great. We want you," I would not have known how to do this work quite yet. It's by coming and observing and being and trying things on for size, kind of learning the water I was swimming in, so to speak, a little bit more deeply. That's what put me in a position to feel like I could do this work.
Mm-hmm. And we talked about it the other day, but the part of the work is obviously, we just said worship leadership, which is I've done once or twice where you lead the Sunday service, which is sometimes literal service. That's what drew me and my family here, is that you were literally making sandwiches for the homeless, or doing service for the community. But then also there's an aspect of your work that's pastoral care that reminds me, I know it's not therapy, but it reminds me of just caring for individuals within the community too. Can you speak to that work a little?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that is part of, on paper, that's part of the job. And it's definitely one of those things when you first, you read that, you hear those words like, what is pastoral care? And it sounds very, there's this kind of like shroud of mystery that it exists behind. And I think for me initially too, it's like, I don't think I'm qualified to do. But the more you step into this work, the more I have stepped into this, I'm like, it's gotten very much demystified. I'm like, oh, it's holding space. It's providing a calm, non-anxious, compassionate presence for someone. And it's not meant to take the place of therapy. Oftentimes it's meant to take place over the course of just a few different sessions. And then oftentimes the person offering pastoral care will refer you to someone, maybe a therapist, maybe someone else in the community that does more long-term work. I think the idea is just that really you are being tasked with just creating a space so the other person can access their own knowing and begin to access some of their own healing capacity. Almost like homeopathy in a way, where you're just a little hint of medicine in the field so that they can begin to, their body, their immune system, their spirit, their mind can begin to kind of integrate into some solution. It's not meant to come from me. So, yeah.
But that's a little different than maybe pastoral care in other traditions. Particularly, I know the Christian tradition where they do treat it almost like counseling or therapy. You wouldn't put it in that category.
Yeah. And I get, because there's a tradition of pastoral counseling, and I myself, before I came to this work, I did a lot of coaching work, which I really like. And I've had to kind of like curtail some of those things because, in the coaching realm, it's very much people are coming and asking for some advice, some support. They want resources and systems. Have you tried this? And
Goal
what about
setting.
this? Yeah, which I'm all about. I'm like, ooh, systems and goals and lists we can check off. But it's not that. So I've had to kind of unlearn some of those. And I think a lot of it is just about permission seeking too, because some people will come in and it's very clear that they just want to be held. They just want to be tended. They don't need one more person saying, have you tried this? Have you read this book? They just need someone to hold them in loving presence. And so there's that discernment piece, and just asking permission, how would it feel for me to offer a resource to you? Would it be okay if I gave you this, this podcast link or this book or what have you? And some people are open and some people, they need to be tended in that moment.
And so now, how long have you been officially the HUUF Lay Minister?
Lay Minister. I don't think it's been that long. Yeah. This has been February, I think, is when the congregation made this.
Okay.
Yeah. And prior to that, it was me functioning as part of a ministerial team, which was its own kind of iteration. And I think that was for about 2 years. So
just about 6 months almost.
Yeah.
That you've been officially a lay minister. And lay just means that you don't have some of the trainings out of regular.
Don't have all those letters behind my name. Yep.
And that's something we're trying to break. That's a great segue
Yeah.
into family and this theme, because what made me want to do this theme is I think some people follow me because I've been opening a little bit more about my family and how I bring yoga and healing work into my family. It's always just has to, right? Integrate within family life. And we went to the retreat, and I remember it just made a big impression on me. We went 2 years in a row, and this last time, after hearing everybody, even myself, feeling like, okay, we're not so alone. And then you saying, this experiment with the nuclear family is, and I always will remember that because it's true. Made me want to investigate that more and the reasons why the nuclear family has persisted, and just talk about with a fellow leader in the community about why is it this way and how can we start breaking it down, and what does family actually really mean. And so I'm curious why or how you see the nuclear family failing us.
So I think one of the place I want to start is a little bit just so my daughter's 13 right now, so she has very different needs than she had 5, 6, 7 years ago. But she was in 3rd grade when the pandemic started, when the world got shut down. Her birthday's in March, and I think she was one of the last like real birthday parties to happen before everything just went into lockdown. And I remember, because it was a good, year or two where there was just so much isolation, and she's an only child. And people would come up to me, just very concerned, how is your daughter doing? She's an only child. And I had to kind of, let them in. And I was like, well, actually, she's not really having an only child experience. And a lot of that was kind of by design. We live on, a kind of sprawling piece of property with 3 different buildings on it. And at the time, we had 2 other families living there. We had like arranged it in such a way we wanted these buildings to be affordable so that like single moms could come and rent them, people who are in transition, people who maybe had more love and energy and, community building in them than they had financial resources. And so at the time the world shut down, there's 5 other kids living at the property. So even though she didn't have siblings, she had, kind of these like pandemic cousins, if you will. So, every day she would do her 3 hours of Zoom schooling, and then we would just open up the doors, and then all 5 of them spilling out into the yard. And it was like, okay, come and get us when you need a snack. If someone falls down and needs something. They had a very when I think about the kind of childhood she had early on, it doesn't seem like the kind of childhood a lot of kids are having nowadays, just kind of open-ended and free and very village based. And this
Were they the same age-ish?
They were all, I think ranging from about age like 4 or 5 up till about 11 or 12, so just, a good range, and, just a little Neverland that they could go inhabit. And it just always, that has always felt to be the way that we're supposed to be doing things. When I hear about, the way we would construct, our villages and our world, just, like 100 or so years ago. And, you think about multi-generational living, right? Where you had like parents and grandparents and the old and the young living and together and being in community together. And people our age would be going out and, acquiring the means for life, while the grandparents would stay home with the children, and, they would teach them. And
do you think that made me think about this a little bit? And I did do a little research. I didn't share with Amy. Sorry, Amy. Did a little research around it. But do you think that is a myth? That's something I wonder about.
I wonder about that too, because it's very easy to look back and be like, well, it used to be. I mean, that's how we get things like, MAGA, right? Like make it great again, make it what it used to be. And it might be. And I also think it's a powerful mythology. And I think there's some basis. I know that my life has always worked better when I'm not just trying to do things in the context of, my own little family, when I have access to other mamas, when I have access to other families, other people who have skills and ways of being in this world that I don't have. And you spoke to kind of the retreat too. I mean, that was something I witnessed just there in microcosm. Was like, there was never a time. I mean, at any given time, I don't know that anyone knew where their children were. It's just like, they're in a tree, they're over here. But we knew that they attended, either it was, the teenagers that I had brought were kind of keeping an eye, or it was some other mama or auntie or caretaker, or everyone had their eyes on the kid. And so there was this sense of we take care of each other. It doesn't all have to fall on me. It doesn't all have to fall on my co-parent or my partner, which is a huge, huge thing to put upon just one or two people, So
one of the things I saw in my research, I'd be curious, is like that the stages in which this was developed, which started even way back in medieval times, and it's related to, potentially there's scholars that believe it related to like the church trying to break up larger families, and for several different reasons, so that they could indoctrinate, so they'd be less influenced by, other people. But also, if you start breaking down people into families versus intergenerational wealth, then some of that wealth would go to the church. So there was that, and then it got revved up in the industrial age, but then even more so in the Cold War, where it was like we were trying to make big propaganda, different points or kind of views of communism versus the American way of, we have moms that are willing to not go to work and do everything for the family, which is more wholesome than sending them to cold and chaotic child centers, something like that communism would do. And I wonder about it, which gets to the heart of, Unitarian Universalist has a vein in Christianity. And we've both been harmed, like you said, it draws in spiritual trauma. How do we start to call in people back to community when a lot of people's experience with community through church has been this bolstering of the nuclear family, of bootstrap mentality, of, individualism? How do you start to heal that?
Yeah.
Do you think?
I mean, it could be said, I think maybe one of the silver linings of the just like dumpster fire we're living through right now is I think people are reaching a point where they have no other choice. The systems that were initially put in place to support us, be that, healthcare system, financial system, they're collapsing, and for some people they're collapsing at a much, depending where you are on the ladder, how close to the margins you are. For some people they're collapsing quite rapidly. And I think when we're okay, right, when our basic needs are met, we can afford to go on a nice vacation a couple times a year, we can afford all the niceties of a basic middle class life. We don't need to look too far, right? We have what we need met within that little nuclear unit. I think it's when things start to fall apart, that's when we realize, oh my God, I need so much more than this. I need much more than just one other adult that I can like share my pain and my sorrow and my worries with. I need support for my parenting. I need financial support. And I think it's, my husband's a gardener, and he kind of speaks plant. And so he always talks about, like when a plant has plenty of water, it doesn't need to grow much, right? But it's when you kind of deprive a plant of water, that's when its root systems will actually start to spread out because it's looking for the thing that it needs.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what we're witnessing a little bit right now, just with more people showing up and saying, it's not enough. It's not enough. I need more than what I can provide myself and just what my small little household can provide me. I need more support. I need more connection. I need more than this modern, kind of capitalist nightmare American dream can give me. And I think, there's this thing about, it's been said by, the way in which the trauma entered is often the way in which the trauma can exit. And I think I'm not saying it quite right, but I know for me, being in a spiritual community has healed a lot of that works moderately well, right? And does its best to live according to its values, has been healing. So it's like, the trauma entered through the avenue of spiritual community, but it's also being healed in that avenue as well. And I feel like coming and finding that connection, I think is the hope that people, if they're willing to do the vulnerable thing of asking and saying, I can't do this alone anymore. I need more. I need people. I need connection and care.
Yeah.
I think some of that healing and that trauma can start to be met.
Yeah. And in my own personal experience, I know we reached that point when we started having children. Like, I think my youngest was almost 2 when we started joining. And we were probably for a year, even after counting, depleted. We were just completely depleted, and our relationship was starting to splinter because we were trying to do it all on our own. And I don't even think I realized how much we were trying to do all on our own until reflecting recently, to be honest, like looking back on first moving here, feeling so isolated in both Michigan home and then when we moved here in the Eureka home, and trying just to get everything I needed from Dave and or myself. Just, there wasn't enough. Like you said, not enough water for that.
Yeah.
And the first retreat, I was crying because I was like, oh, this is what I've been needing, is just someone else to take my children for a minute, and we would find it, but we'd have to pay for it,
Yeah.
And then this retreat, I wasn't having to cry because I had been bolstered for a year of different ways of finding that within the community, and the relationships growing deeper. Dave was able to talk to other dads about his struggles with parenthood, or, and maybe not feeling open enough to do that a year ago. So it's like, it takes time too, is what I would say, like to marinate those relationships.
Yeah.
And I think that is an art form that has been lost maybe too, is relationships in community, because we're so scared of it, or we've been so drawn back from it. So when I talk to people about this, I can tell they're skeptical, not of just the community, but how do I form a relationship in a community and trust that?
I mean, I think what you're saying is, it takes time, we talk about the relationship, because we don't have a central creed. It's not like, you have to be baptized, you have to sign on and say that this is what we all believe. And, if you stop believing, then you're excommunicated. It's very, we talk about this as a covenantal relationship, and that gets compared a lot to marriage, right? And so, it's funny too, because there's this, talk about like, growing your membership, right? From this kind of like very, very church kind of top down way of looking at our community. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And a lot of, kind of the old school method is like, oh, well, you just bring someone in and they sign the membership book and then they're a member. And I, for a long time, kind of pushed back. I'm like, what does that have to do with entering into a covenantal relationship? If you don't understand the group of people that you're committing to, if you don't understand how they operate and some of the beliefs both spoken and unspoken that they're operating by, and the culture, you can't make a meaningful commitment, right? You need to have that initial investment. You need to try it on for size. You need to, you would never, hopefully, right, form a lifelong marital type commitment without having that initial courtship period of getting to, are your values aligned? Is the life you want to live and the world you want to build congruent, and do you bring complementary skills to the table so that you can do that, um, and I think it's just as important here, is to make this truly a covenantal relationship. There has to be some, time, but and vulnerability. It's not enough to just, okay, I signed the book, I'm sending a check in. What is that? That's that's so flimsy. That's so flimsy. Because so it seems to me, and when I first started working here and I was trying to get my bearings and my footing, what really helped me was my friend Therese, who was the DRE at the time, just saying, it's just like everything we do is relationship based. Everything we do. And the more you can really fortify those and build relationships of trust and reciprocity, and just really letting your guard down, letting yourself be known and get to know others, that's how you build. And I think that's, how this community was forged in the first place. It was just people coming together and saying, I want this. I want to live in this kind of world. I want to have this kind of space for myself and my family, and finding other people. Yeah, I want that too. Let's come together. Let's share our resources. Let's share our vision and see what we can collectively build together. So
then, speaking of vision and family, how would you define the future family that we want to create, given the type of covenant we have here? Well, how would you describe that family in the future, that vision that you have for family?
I mean, a lot of what I see at this moment is I feel like the need is so great. And so it asks something different. I think when, again, that idea of when the economy is booming, everyone's doing pretty okay. Your needs are different. Maybe you just need a little shoring up on Sundays. Maybe you just need a little reminder about, the bigger picture, the numinous, the mystery, that we're all connected to. But I don't feel like we're in that moment. I feel like people are suffering, and it's by design. And so I feel like we're really entering into a period of mutual aid. We were talking the other day in our staff meeting about how, I made the correlation to, I don't know if did you ever go on mission trips when you were a kid?
No, thank goodness.
Yeah.
No.
No. I heard that same association. Yeah, there's
a lot of family members that have and have great experiences with them, but I was out by the time I was 8. So
okay. Yeah. Ooh, gosh, no, and I mean, it was, there's a very colonial thing involved in all of this. But one thing I did appreciate about being in those spaces is, because we were talking, we're going to bring the word of the Lord and, spiritual enlightenment and all to these communities. But there is also the awareness, you can't talk to people about God if they don't have enough to eat, if they don't have a place to lay their head at night, if their basic needs, on that Maslow's pyramid are not being met. You can't talk to them about these high-minded, things about the spirit. You need to tend to the body first before they're even able to, they need a full belly. They need to know where they're going to land, that, if they're where they'll be housed for the evening. And I feel like there's a piece of that we're coming to is we need to learn how to care for one another in ways that we haven't before. So
do you think, I'm part of I just came back from having a college reunion friendship we do once every 18 months or so, and we're all queer, some more presenting queer than others, and we call each other family. Do you think that family needs to go beyond biology? Do you think we need to start considering these communities as family? And I know some people will and some people won't, maybe, but what's your take on that?
I mean, I wonder if the languaging is as essential as just the sentiment. I mean, for someone like myself, I have a very There's not much relationship between me and my family of origin. We'll see each other maybe once a year. There's not a lot of communication. We don't have shared values. Grateful to them for everything. They helped put me through school and, gave me all my basic needs and then some met. But as far as the people that are going to help show me the kind of woman that I want to be and help grow me into that capacity, the family that raised me is not going to be the family that helps grow that capacity. And I found that here. I know for me at a certain point, back in my 20s, where I kind of had this come to Jesus moment where I realized, my biological mother, right, was not going to be able to mother me in the way that I wanted, needed, or deserved. And I had to let that go. And that left this huge desire and vacancy in my life. I was like, but I still have the desire to commune with, with wisdom. I want to be mentored. I want to come into contact with rad older women who can show me about life and about what we're doing here, and show me what it means to be like an empowered, strong, badass woman in the world. It's like, but it's in ways that I was never shown. And I think it was at that was a turning point for me personally, because I just acknowledged I had this need, I had this desire. And that's when people started coming, like my first, when I did my yoga teacher training, I consider her a powerful mentor in my life. So many of the women that I've met here in this fellowship, that didn't have children of their own, have had a very powerful mothering presence in my life. I don't know if I think of them as family, but I think of them as, these amazing gifts from the divine that showed up and filled a beautiful hole in my life and, nurtured a part of me that needed nurturing.
Yeah. And I know it's somewhat semantic, but I guess that's part of my inquiry in like changing our structures is what are the ingredients that would make, this person family versus maybe just part of the community. Does that make sense? And I'm curious in my own life, like there's people at HUUF that slowly feel like they're becoming more like family. And what is that quality versus just a community? Does that make sense?
It does. And I think there's just a certain amount of just showing up that's involved, because that's one thing about, we didn't have the retreat for the first few years. I was mostly due to COVID.
Yeah.
And I remember when there was such a big push to kind of bring that back, and I was like, why are we pushing so hard to make this happen? And then I went, I was like, oh,
This is why.
oh, I see it all of a sudden, because something happens when you just do the basics of life together, when you break bread together, when you sit down and just find yourself in, extemporaneous conversation, when you slow down and the only thing that's really on the agenda for the day is just to connect with others, connect with the beautiful environment you're in, like do life together in a very intentional way. Those are the people that and you see them carry that forward, they're the ones that come back and they're like, okay, I want to carry this connection and this intimacy and this vision of what life could be together. I want to see this integrated moving forward. And I think it asks that we just have to get a lot more vulnerable, I think, than we're used to getting,
Intimacy comes to mind. There's a particular Tiffany feels in some ways really big part of my family because she's so intimate with the girls. And she's had such intimate conversations with them. So that comes to mind. And I trust her. Trust feels important with family. And that's really hard when it's broken. Yeah.
And how do we do repair too, right? Because I think that's a lot of it too, is like a lot of us weren't shown how to do repair work, if that trust, if we see a warble between someone's, stated values and then what they actually do, how do we bridge that? How do we go to the other person lovingly and say, there was harm done and I need you to address it. I don't want to throw you out into the cold. I don't want to be done with you and cancel you or ghost you.
Part of our culture,
right?
It was cancel, ghosting. And it reminds me of I think why some people are afraid to go to communities is that exposure of vulnerability and intimacy, and then being shunned or having to shun others due to some, probably experience they had in the past, that's how they've dealt with it, right?
Mhm.
If I meet something that doesn't align, or if I meet something that's I have an aversion to, then I'll just create a huge boundary versus that repair work that could actually, it might still be the same. Like I have an aversion to that, but I can still meet you on a human level.
And it's work. I mean, like
Yeah.
that you spoke to. I mean, it's not just like it's so much heavy lifting, as far as like just even working up the courage to like go to that someone who you've got beef with, right? I mean, and I would say that's the true test of how valuable the relationship actually is too, because I know for myself, I've had moments of rupture with others. And I came to a point when, and I was like, is this a relationship that is going to grow me, is going to teach me, that I want to lean into and bring closer into my heart and my life? Or is this is showing me that we don't need to really walk too close together, And so so I know for me, when I make the choice not to ask for the repair, I'm basically saying this relationship doesn't mean that much to me,
Yeah. And then last question with that, then it makes me wonder, would that be something that is, because I know I heard you created big boundary with your mom, and I've had to do that with family members too, but would that make the breaking difference between family and like they're just part of this community and I'm part of this community too, and we have a community together, but we're not family, because I'm not going to let you back in kind of close.
Yeah. For me, the test is, if I want to continue to grow in relationship and grow the relationship, and there's a warble there, to me, the test of that is, am I willing to do the difficult thing of asking for the repair, even though it may not come, right? So,
but I even think about divorce, right? Sometimes that's where it comes. It's like, no, we're not willing to do it. And so we've divorced. We're no longer family. But if we are willing to do it, then we're still family. And in a way, they're still family, because they have children together, but it's not in that same covenant like you've talked about.
Yeah.
So that just made me think maybe that's an ingredient to that sense or feeling of family.
Yeah.
Of I'm willing to keep growing with this relationship.
Well, and that both people are too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. That mutuality, I think, is key, because
So with every guest, I am going to end with a little questionnaire, just kind of rapid fire type questions. Did you ever, I'm sure you did, the Actor Studio with James?
Oh, I remember that. Yep. Yes.
Absolutely loved it. So it's kind of, it's an homage to him, I guess. So I want to ask you a few questions. You can just say whatever comes first to your mind if you can. They can be short, word or sentences. And I have 9 questions. And the first one is, what makes your spirit expand?
I think anything creative makes my spirit expand. I think I married my husband explicitly because he's an artist, and then all the other things just happen to kind of come along with. But yeah, creative, anything in the realm of the creative speaks to me. Yes.
What makes your spirit contract?
The news right now.
Yes.
The news. Yeah. Trying to find a space to take that in without just dying a little bit inside right now. So, yeah.
What emotion has been your greatest teacher so far?
Wow. That's not a small question.
No.
I feel like I've spent the most time with sorrow. So I think that one has been a companion for the longest. So I've learned how to kind of mine that for what it wants to teach me. So
Yeah.
Sorrow.
And what do you collect that says the most about you?
I have a book problem going on. Yeah, I'm not allowed to buy any more books, but I will be either way. So yes, because I need them in my world.
And I think this next one will be big for you too, but what do you wish you could learn?
Cello,
Uh-huh.
another couple languages.
Yeah.
If I had more time, I would spend more time learning more modern dance. Yeah, those things.
If you had a top one, what would it be out of those three?
I don't want to choose.
No. Okay.
I'll just make room for all three of those
Okay.
sometime in my life. Yeah.
What do you wish you could unlearn?
I'm noticing as my kid gets older, I am trying to. There's a controlling part of me that is coming forth because I feel like I can't relax into what is. I have to control the way things are moving, and so I wish I could unlearn some of that controlling and just lean into trusting what's arising, trusting the people in the room, trusting that other people have their knowing and their path that has little to do with my agenda and my 4-point plan for things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the top of your bucket list in places or events?
Places or events. As far as places to
Go visit or events to go to?
Well, when I turned 40, which was 3 years ago, I told my family that I was going to go do the Camino. And so I tried to get them to come with me, and that didn't happen. So we went to Hawaii instead. So the Camino still needs to happen. Yeah.
This one's kind of big too. Just prepping you. If consciously you met your soul before birth, what would it whisper to you? Coming into the world.
Wow. The words that come up for me when you say that, and I don't know if they don't make any sense to me, but just keep going.
Yeah.
Just keep going. Yeah.
And what would your 10-year from now, decade from now, future self thank you for?
I think just trusting the process. Yeah. Trusting the process, even though I say I'm not good at that.
I know.
I'm
it's
better.
so-
I'm
it's
getting
not-
better. I'm getting better. So
She's wise.
staying with it, even though I can't always see how it all comes together, just staying with it and letting it unfold. Yeah.
I can't thank you enough, Amy, for your time and your energy and your honesty and sincerity. Love you so much.
Thank you, Holland.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.